So I'm gonna, beautiful stuff written in the chat, such fantastic curiosities and intentions, and such amazing people joined us in the salon tonight. So we'll open it up in a bit. Again, I wanted to get us into what this amulet is. I'm gonna put it up here again, and I'll tell you the English translation that I translated on the fly. It's mostly Hebrew and a bit of Yiddish. So it says, Baruch Hashem, blessed God, this is a protection for plague, God forbid. Tested and approved by the righteous rabbi, our teacher, Rabbi Moshe Teitelbaum of blessed memory. More about him in a minute. The Hebrew rhymes, I didn't get the English, it's up for grabs. Through this gate, no sorrow enters. Through this door, no fear enters. Through this portal, no murder enters. Our master of the world, it's a small, big change, add a U there. Our master of the world, Ribono Shel Olam, as you passed over the homes of Israel in Egypt and did not let the destroyer to enter their homes, so shall you stop the destroyer from entering our homes and the homes of all Israel. Amen, Selah. Then there's a little box that has these two names. The mother of Abraham, our father, Amtalai, daughter of Karnavo, and Serach, daughter of Asher. Then there's a little line in Yiddish on the bottom. All of it is in Hebrew, and it says, here we have already suffered from pox, measles, and scarlet fever. On the bottom in Hebrew, copyright applies. So, I didn't know much about amulets before this, so I went researching. And here's what I got. First of all, about the writer. So I have a great photo of him. Hold on. It's a drawing, right? Rabbi Moshe Teitelbaum, for those of you who are familiar with the Hasidic world of today, is the great-grandfather of Satmar. But his grandson became the first grand rabbi of Satmar in Hungary. So we are in the very beginning of the 19th century, late 18th. But Moshe Teitelbaum was a Polish rabbi who was anti-Hasidic, very rational, misnagdim type, but he got swept in by the Hasidic movement at the very tail end of the second wave, and he became a big Hasid and became a mystic and became an amulet writer. He probably made, from what I researched, a side business writing amulets. It was very profitable. So he was the rabbi of a town, my Hungarian sucks, Ujeli in Hungary for a long time. And there he went through, like a lot of Europe, a bunch of different diseases. And this amulet surfaced in the very beginning of the 20th century in print. Maybe with the First World War, unclear, with that flu, but came back online about a month ago. What you're not seeing in the English, but you can see in the original Hebrew or in the photo, is that in the middle of it is the main thing, which is the permutations of God's name. Yud Hey Vav Hey, the four-letter name, is used as art in some way. I'll just take mine off the altar. And I will know enough to say that I don't know enough about what these permutations mean, and I'm not even going to try. If there are mystics among us tonight who have a good sense of how these different names of God are used as a kind of jigsaw puzzle to mean something very specific in Kabbalistic terms that's beyond my grade, by all means. Jill, I don't know if you've got anything on the use of names. I know you've done some work with that. You unmuted.
Yeah. Well, in some mystical works, including the Sefer Yetzirah, the Book of Creation, which is a book I've been translating, permutations of God's name are used as a protection, like as a sealing of a sacred space. So I'm not exactly sure which, combination, what this particular combination represents, but you can see that, that it's being repeated, which makes me think that it's intended as some kind of protection.
Right.
And it's also a verse, right, about Pinchas praying.
Yes, and the plague was stopped. Right. Yeah. There's this
one.
Yeah.
There are some amulets that have that verse. I'm not sure. Someone told me one of the ways to use these is as a breathing technique. Like Abulafia, who was an interesting performative mystic, used a lot of breathing work to pronounce God's name in lots of different permutations. So in some way, this is a breathing exercise that I just don't have the key to, but some might. And in other ways, it's a visual map of meditation, like you sort of focus on it. I'll tell you where my fascination was, and I wonder about yours. I was really interested in how they used the story of Egypt and the plague, and of course, wow, here we are at home and hoping that it skips our doors. If you see the different boxes, then the middle one in the middle with all those big hay letters, that's the permutations of God. I believe it's the 72 letter name of God, which again, I do not want to get into. Maybe that's later on the part 2 of this. The passage in between the two the two lower boxes is the one about Egypt. As you skip the houses of Egypt, skip ours. And then the box below is where we really wanted to play. So these are these two strange matriarchs that pop up in one amulet. And to the best of my not super busy research, we've all been a little busy. There's not much that we know about why they come together and even why they come in the world of amulets. But all three of us going to shed some light on it. And Alicia Jo has a beautiful song about one of them that maybe we're going to get to in a little bit. Naomi, can you, there you go. Thank you. So, right, I think we're following our program that we wanted to sort of open this question about the use of amulets in our lives and where we turn to the various earthly traditions such as these for comfort. And maybe Jill, you wanted to talk a little bit about that. And then we'll talk about these two women, about the mother of Abraham.
Yep.
And then Serach Bat Asher, the eternal living crone. It's two mythic characters.
So should I say something about both those things, amulets and the women?
Yeah, whichever way you feel like.
So, as I said earlier, amulets are these sort of, embodied prayers. They are, meant to be sort of charged with our intention, right? And also to, somehow provide often a physical barrier of protection. And although they're not, spoken about in books of Jewish law, they were actually very common. You see amulets in Jewish communities all around the world. Sometimes they're made out of stone. Sometimes they look like little animals. Sometimes they look like embroidery that's sewn into garments. Sometimes they're written in scrolls or they're paper like this one. They actually take sometimes it's a dried etrog or another kind of repurposed ritual object. There are a lot of different ways that amulets get made, but it's very common in Jewish amulets to have words like this, to have the words themselves embody the protective energy. Amulets often invoke, first of all, the divine. So here you see the divine name, right? The God is being invoked as a protective entity and a sheltering entity. But amulets also invoke angels sometimes. Sometimes you'll see ancestors. It's very rare in my experience to see biblical women invoked in an amulet. We do have in the Talmud the mother of Abaye, who's one of the few women quoted in the Talmud, talking about her use of amulets and how to make them. But we don't often see them in amulets. So I saw this amulet first in a museum in Paris. I happened to be in Paris at a time that this amulet was on display with a whole bunch of other amulets. They had collected hundreds of amulets from Jews of different communities. And this amulet was on display. And I immediately took a picture of it. I said, oh my gosh, Sarah Bat Asher is here. It was very exciting for me. So I've spent a little time thinking about these two women. Just to be really brief, the mother of Abraham is not mentioned anywhere in the Bible. She's mentioned briefly in the Talmud that the mother of Abraham is Emetlai or Amatlai or Amtilai or something like that, daughter of Carnabo. And there's a story about her, which is that she gives birth to Abraham in a cave because the king at the time has been told that the child that will be born is going to threaten him, right? You probably know this story from Moses and Jesus. So all children are being killed, and so she goes to this cave to give birth, and she leaves the child, and she comes back, and he's, it's a week later, and now he can walk and talk, and he's discovered God. So there's a whole miracle story associated with her. And Sarah Bat Asher is also a character who really who's mentioned in the Bible, but there's no story about her. She is, in legend, the one who tells Jacob that Joseph is alive as a young woman. She plays the harp to him and sort of tells him this very shocking news that he doesn't know. He thinks his son is dead. She tells him his son is alive. And so she's granted eternal life. And so she goes on living for many generations, and she provides advice, and she knows where Joseph's bones are when the people have to leave Egypt. So she's also this really interesting, almost Elijah-like character. And the last thing I'll say about them is I've been thinking a lot since Amichai invited me into this conversation about what they might both be doing here. And one thing I think is that they're both involved in finding out that someone is alive who you thought was not alive. So Amtalai thinks her son is dead, and turns out he isn't. And Sarah is the one who conveys the news to Jacob that he thinks his child is dead, but that's not the case. So I'm curious about maybe their role as bearers of good news, or maybe resurrectors in some way. Maybe that's part of why they're being invoked here. But very unusual. I've never seen anything like this.
Wow, thank you. I'm thinking maybe this is a good moment we've heard so much, and this is so much gorgeous information, to let our hearts process some of this. So Alicia Jo, I want to invite you to take us into your Serach piece, and whatever you want to tell us about her. And then we'll see, let's open it up. I know Kaya wanted to share with us some information about the names. And I really want to open it up to you all. What do these two matriarch crone archetypes showing up here mean to you? We can try and fix this puzzle together, perhaps. Yeah, Alicia Jo.
So I actually, before I play, I want to see if I can, no, it's not. I'm trying to just paste into the field. Well, can I just briefly read this, one of the midrashim about her that I really love, because I think it might kind of open up the song a little bit. Is that okay? So, so this is exactly what Rabbi Jill was referring to. Oh, there's a character limit. Okay. Okay. So I'll just kind of tell it like a story. It's not that long. It's like about 10 sentences. The sons of Jacob went to the land of Canaan, right? So they've come down to Egypt. They've discovered that their brother Joseph is actually alive. So they're coming back up to tell their father Jacob that his favorite son is not dead. And when they came to the boundaries of the land, they said to one another, how should we tell him? If we tell him suddenly, he'll be confused by our words and he'll refuse to listen to us. When they approached their houses, they met Sarah coming towards them. She was beautiful, wise, and a skilled harpist. They called her and she came to them and kissed them, and they gave her a harp, which is also violin in Hebrew, which is nice because I play violin, and said, please go sit down before our father Jacob and play this harp and tell him these words. And she hurried to Jacob and sat down before him, and she picked up her harp and played beautifully and sang in the sweetness of her voice, Joseph, my uncle, he is alive, and he rules over the land of Egypt, he is not dead. And she continued to play and sing words like these. Jacob heard her words and found them sweet, and when he heard her sing it again and again, the heart of Jacob was possessed by joy through the sweetness of her voice. And the Spirit of God came over him, and he knew that all her words were true. And Jacob blessed Sarah for singing these words before him, and he said, my daughter, may death have no power over you, for you have revived my spirit. Just sing this song one more time for me, for you have brought me joy with your words. And one of the things I love so much about this is that it's a story where music is a pastoral tool, right? Where art is pastoral and informational. Art is a way of conveying this important real life kind of breaking news, right? That Joseph's alive, but it can't come through an insensitive kind of just like slam in the face announcement, because that would damage Joseph, right? Who's very old. And so it needs to be said lovingly and carefully and precisely. And so I love this because I feel like in part it's a story about the power of art to help us interpret what's happening around us and to convey information, to connect. And I love that this, young woman was this niece, right, was the person who had the power to safely convey this information. I'm sorry, I said Joseph, I meant Jacob. Sorry, Jacob is elderly, right? So it's a young woman in this, obviously it's a quite patriarchal tradition, and, the men are really the ones who are doing the going up and down and conveying the important information, but it can't happen without the magic of art. And that means also the people who know how to make art, which in this case is this young woman. So I really love that. And I'm going to play the song that I wrote in her voice, and you can't see totally, but I do want to show you a little bit that I use this looping pedal, right? So I'm using electronic pedals with my violin. So I'm kind of building a texture live, but you'll hear a lot of violin, even though I'm just playing one. And the last thing I want to say is that my upstairs neighbor is teaching a drum lesson, so I apologize if a little bit of drums get in there. Okay. All right. Can you still hear me? Yeah, okay. Tell me what you're looking for. I'll show you what you have. The pearl inside the oyster of your heart. I've seen the bones rise from the river. I've watched them shining in the dark. Do you think that it's too late to find the one you love? I know him and he's looking for you too. The waters parted, but it wasn't like they said. No
down to hold them. Has there been a loneliness like mine? Touching on the hidden walls of time.
Wow, Alicia Jo, that was hypnotic. Thank you. So friends, a couple more words about Tzerach Bat Asher and Amtalai. I'll share some thoughts and then let's open it up. What do you all think? So first, strange coincidence I want to share with you all. I'm going to try and do a photo here. And another. And another. Let's see if I can do my screen share. No. A couple of months ago, I was in Israel for a brief sabbatical. And I was trying to write, and I was getting some done, and some was stuck. And then I was up in the north, and my friend said, "You need to go visit Tzerach Bat Asher." I said, "What?" They said, "Do you know that up in Klil, this little village up in the Galilee, there is a tree dedicated to Serach, the daughter of Asher, the crone?" I said, "I had no idea." So we went there, and the photos there, I don't know if you can see them, are the tree. It's an oak tree in Elah. On the side of the road, there's a lot of ribbons attached to it. People go there as though to sacred trees all over the world that for generations and generations are considered sacred, as the goddess was to our people, and her name was Asherah, Astarte. And Asherah, the goddess, we're told in the Bible, was vehemently cut down. The trees were cut down, and the priestesses were killed, and the temples were destroyed. And the goddess worship way of our ancestors was replaced by the patriarchal one. Who are we dealing with now? And maybe we're watching the post-patriarchy in action. But that tree, sacred tree of Tzerach Bat Asher, which is a modern invention, some guy put it up. People come to pray there, and people come to be quiet there, and people come to just have a moment. So I put a couple of the photos on Facebook, and I'll put them up later, but I was taken there, and I was blindfolded, and I was led down to the heart of the tree and instructed to just make my prayers and wishes. And I wish I remembered what I prayed and wished for. It may have been about my own writing process, but I'm sure I rippled it out. And it felt like a connection to this mythic creature. And it's not just whoever Serach was or is in our literature. It is like Alicia Jo talked about the beauty of art to manage to convey information that data can't. the storytellers of 2,000 years and more who have spun this character out of the sidelines of our mythology and made this archetype, this teacher who begins as a little kid who through music is able to bring hope, and then becomes this elder who through knowing the right words can tell Moses how to get the Exodus going. So this mythic creature who according to some traditions has not yet died, and in some has lived for thousands of years in our imagination, the power of the imagination. And then the second is Abraham's mother, of whom the only credible text I found about her is from other than the text that Jill described, which is peculiar, and from the Talmud, I found a 15th century comment and healing practice. This is from Hachida, Rabbi Chaim Yosef David Azulai, who was Moroccan. I am going to say 18th century. Chida, Avodat HaKodesh, says it's a good practice for one who appears before a sovereign or a minister, for a judge. One should say the name of Abraham's mother, Amtalai Bat Karnavo, 17 times before the meeting. No one's going anywhere, but your next court hearing, I'm going to testify in Congress about what's going on here. 17 times, Abraham's mother. Is she the mother of patriarchy? Like Jill said, is she, something about the birth of Abraham and her sight and foresight? There's a couple of other crumbs about her, but that's all I got on her. There's the thing about Haman's mother, but I'm going to leave that aside. That's just another weird footnote. So that's so far the quick archival research on why these two matriarchs are on an amulet from the early 19th century in Hungary by an amulet maker who was a rabbi who's not around for us to ask. But somehow these figures are here. And maybe just as a way for us to find ways to focalize and reach to our own matriarchs and magic makers and artists and artisans and healers and crones and old wisdom for ways out of this dark. That's my guess. Sure, there are more specifics. I want to...
There were a few people that were wondering if you had put images in to the chat box because they didn't come out. Did you? Were you?
A little bit further before, I put a couple of photos of the tree of Serach. I'll try once more.
Yeah, we do it one more time and I'll see if I can download it and share it.
Okay, sure. And then I'm going to figure out how to screen share in a responsible way. I want to invite Kaya to generously share with us something back to the middle of the amulet, the divine names. Thank you.
Hi, everyone.
Hi, Kaya.
Hi. I'm sitting here with my husband, Zusha, and my dad as well. Hi, everyone. Thank you for this beautiful, beautiful teaching. Actually, before I want to get into that box, I just wanted to offer something in relationship to Amtalai that I'm wondering about. If she's Abraham's mother, then in some ways she's like the grandmother of all the Jewish people. She's like the grandmama of everybody. And I was thinking about the fact that, when we make a Misha Berach, it's always Bat. We go through the matriarchal line. So maybe in some way she's carrying that like profound matriarchal healing energy as everybody's grandma. That was just my thought about her, to think of her as Bubby and Savta. So going back to the amulet, I just wanted to point out to everyone, in case they didn't really get it, when you look at the box, that actually the name of God is not permutated. It's the same Yud He Vav He in each of the 5 lines. It appears in its natural form 5 times, but there's a tiny little letter that precedes each of the 4 letters of the Tetragrammaton. And when you read across the lines, those little tiny letters, it is from that verse about Pinchas. So the first line reads, the first line reads, Ya'amod, wait a second, there it is. Ve'ya'amod, right? And then the second line says Pinchas. And the divine name is running through the verse, right? So the breath of God, in a way, right? That ephemeral breathing of God's name is being breathed through this pasuk, through this verse. So the first line is V'ya'amod, and then the second line is Pinchas, Pe Yud Nun Chet Samech, going up, you read across, right? You read across, exactly. That's V'ya'amod. The second line is Pinchas. The next line is V'yipalel.
And he prayed.
V'yipalel, and he prayed.
Yeah.
V'ta'atzor hamagef, and the last line is hamagefa, right?
Yeah.
And the plague ended, or the plague was stopped.
Amazing.
He stopped the plague. So that's the verse of stopping the plague, but it's interpolated. I guess I would use the word rather than
Wow.
Interpolated with God's name in every syllable, in every letter, in every energetic bite of that verse is the presence of God's name, of God, the presence of God.
Blessed be the divinity of teachers. Thank you, Kaya. You solved it for us. Amazing. Wow. And I love the grandma that Amtala is like, yeah, because where are you going to go? Like, Noah's mom, like, right? Yishal Kochech, thank you. So profound. Jill and Alicia Jo, I think you were saying before about that Tzela Magafa, and I'm like, I didn't see it there. I saw it in other amulets, but you saw this before. Amazing. I'm so grateful for understanding it now. Wow, who's doing that? Naomi, is that you? Oh my God, you're so cute. Amazing. So friends, it's 7 minutes to 9. I don't know if anybody wants to go a little bit over to just hear from some of you, some reactions. Let's just take 8 minutes of just a bunch of us sharing. Any response to this amulet, its discoveries, these matriarchs, whatever is useful to you at this time, like I'm asking us to speak briefly if we can and unmute ourselves, and let's try and get some responses and conversation.
I wanted to ask Rabbi Jill a question. You say that these 2 women are being invoked. I sort of thought I knew what invoked means, but could you be a little clearer? What is expected by the amulet or the person who has it of these 2 women in this text?
I think it's a complicated question because, when an angel, for example, gets invoked in an amulet, right? The question is, right, isn't God in charge of all this stuff? And if so, then why do we need to invoke other entities? And yet that is a thing that happens, that, amulets will invoke sort of other angelic ancestral beings who are sort of more personal, but are also imagined to be helpful in protecting their descendants and or their charges. For example, when Eastern European Jewish women are making candles, they will invoke ancestors, right? May Abraham and Sarah and sort of all the beloved dead, may they come to us and help us and keep us from any evil decree. So there is a sense that these other spiritual entities have some intercessionary power of what kind, it's not exactly clear, that they support, God's general intention to keep us safe. So that's what I mean by invoked.
Thanks.
Hi, this is Amy. I'm just a frozen picture. I'm not on the video. I'm thinking if we're saying that both Abraham's mother and Sarah bat Asher were connected to letting people know about lives that were thought to be dead, but they brought the news that, yay, they're alive. A plague has such power to wipe out everybody, the entire population. So perhaps that's why of all mothers, of all female energies and healing forces, that's why they would be called at the time of a plague.
Yeah.
I was also thinking about how in Tikines, Russian and Eastern European women's supplications and prayers, one of the things Jill's referring to, the making of soul candles, was also, in bringing the souls of ancestors into the candles. One of those prayers is that the dry bones rise. And so I was thinking one of the lines in your song says that you have seen the bones rise from the river. And I was thinking about the river of the ancestors flowing, and that maybe this message of the amulet is also, we think that they're dead, but they're not dead, because the dry bones will rise and we all become a part of the earth, and we don't, our souls, we don't die, and that our ancestors teach us through our lives that they aren't dead.
I just want to say I'm so thankful, and I'm so blown away by when I forgot the name of which person showed us the verses that are inscribed in the Yud Hey Vav Hey, and it's interesting because what keeps coming to mind in this plague for me is, might not seem like a Jewish concept, but actually it was in a later adopted Jewish concept, is resurrection. And what is going on is that we will survive this plague and we will be resurrected, is what's coming to me. And this is off topic, but I can't help but think of, this is for another discussion, but I just want to put it out there. Were there amulets being made at the time of the Holocaust?
I want to say something about Amtalai, who I had not thought about, had not learned about. I did not know of her existence. And one night, many, many years ago, I was up in the Himalayas, and I was at a Chabad house for a Shabbat in a small village in the Himalayas. I think Amichai might know the story, but it's a very old one. And I couldn't take it anymore somehow. And I went out onto a hill by myself. And it was just the time when the women in the village were coming out to their little shrines to do their evening prayer. And I was up on a hill way above the Chabad house up in this Himalayan village. And an Indian woman came out by herself. She was grandmotherly. And she walked up by herself to the hill at the back of her home. And there was a little tiny shrine. And she had the incense and she had her bell. And she stood by herself and she lit the incense and she rang the bell, and suddenly I was overcome without having thought about Abraham's mother before at all. I was overcome by like a recognition that this was Abraham's mother. I was transported, and I realized that I hadn't ever thought about before who's Abraham's mom, and that we have a grandmother. And not only that we have a grandmother, but that we have so many cousins, because she's also becomes the mother of Islam. But not only that, she is pre-monotheism, so relates us to the Hindus. She relates us to everybody. And suddenly I realized that through her, she's our grandmother that brings us back to our cousins and to everybody who we lost, actually, in a way, when we broke off into our own community and we never looked back. And so it was a moment of immense elation, love, and devotion. And of course, now in the times that we're at right now, that feels very beautiful to be able to connect to a grandmother. And anyway, we're so worried about the elderly and we're thinking about our grandmothers and our grandfathers. And so it feels very beautiful to be able to connect to a grandmother figure who's also completely ours. She's ours. She's Abraham's mother, but she's also the bubby and the great aunt, you know, the tante, you know, of everyone in the world in some way. For me, that's what I'm feeling, and I feel very emotional thinking about it.
Thank you, Amy. That's so powerful, that story. Thank you. Folks, it's 9 o'clock here in New York, and I know that people have lives. So I'm just going to ask for your patience for another couple of minutes. I want to ask Jill to maybe say a word. And then Alicia Jo, if you want to share a word with us and or maybe just like a little note of lullaby to send us to bed into our grandmother's dreams of healing.
I just want to offer gratitude for the weaving of all of these strands, all of the wisdom that's come out in this beautiful hour with all of you. I'm so happy to see people from storytelling and from the Academy for Jewish Religion where I teach, and from Kohenet and from Lab Shul and so many other places. I'm just really, really grateful. And I'd like to invoke the power of this amulet on us, to the extent that your theologies will allow. I would like to ask Sarah, I would like to ask that the divine will manifested through the motherly love of Sarah Bat Asher and Amtalai, mother of Abraham, be spread on us, that we be sheltered from this storm, and that it will pass, and that we will find that we have good news to share with one another.
Amen.
Amen.
Good. I unplugged and I'm going to play just acoustic, a very short, very famous Yiddish, Eastern European song that my grandmother used to sing to me when I was little at bedtime. It's a lullaby.
Thank you, Alicia Jo. Thank you, Rabbi Jill. Thank you so much, Rabbi Kaya and Amy, and all the wise women and men and people who came to be here tonight to unravel something so we can be more protected. May the merit of the grandmothers and the great-grandmothers protect us all. I hope we have a good night of sweet, real, deep dreams. You're welcome to join us in this new Lab Shul Zoom reality daily at 4 p.m. for our daily soul spa. And hopefully Alicia Jo will come back again soon and play with us, and Rabbi Jill comes and lead with us. You're all invited to. And may we all rise tomorrow with all the energy we need to be here. Amulet help, print it, use it, spread it. I'm going to put a bunch of links here if anybody wants to read more. Just copy this list. It's some articles about Serach, about Amtalai, about amulets. If you
The
can't
link to-
sleep at night.
The link to the recording will be available. We didn't record it from the beginning, but basically from the teaching, and that'll be available soon. We will communicate where all these class recordings are going to be. Most likely they'll be on YouTube.
Yeah.
We also want to invite people to, if you're enjoying this kind of digital content, we want to invite you to join the Partnerhood, Lab Shul's way of expressing our love and our commitment to each other. Amichai, do you want to say anything more about that?
We initiated digital partnerhood a year ago for people who are not in New York. And guess what? We were right. So thank you for joining us. We're here tomorrow at 4 p.m. We'll be here this weekend. The Spiritual Survival Salon is going to be back next week with pre-Passover perspectives on survival skills, both surviving Seder and going deep online. And any way you can be part of our community digitally, you are more than invited. Thank you for your love and support and presence. Thank you, dear teachers. Sweet dreams. Thank you, Naomi, for staying on late to make this happen. And good night, friends. Laila Tov. Sweet.
Laila Tov.
Toda, toda.